we've got the 55 and the 49, both of them being affected by the mutation. This is the 155 that starts the mutation. As we know, 49 is the one that is, its whole channel is shutting down. They're very much, these two gates, keys in this process in the way that the stages of mutation are going to function correctly, and the way that the momentum for these stages actually work. So from the 55, we move down to the 39, and the 39 is what provokes the mutation. So Ra says it's something to keep in mind, this importance of what we see. It represents, in so many ways, it represents so much of the mutative imprinting that is at work. It's something to keep your eye on in terms particularly of the children coming into the world with this kind of definition, and that they're very much going to be aligned in some ways to the changes taking place in the world. Not simply what we're looking at, which is the emergence of a rave, but the way that the world is going to work, because the way the world is going to work is going to be different. Ra's youngest son, Jiva, has this whole channel. So now 60 is really interesting. It carries all the genetic information. Ra called it like this great swinging door. So it's the place where the empowerment of what is going to be our sexual differentiation and the genetic material that's going to be moving forward. All of these things that are rooted in the 60, because it's bringing what was past forward, because it's connected to the larger form principle. And in being connected to this larger form principle, it carries within it not only the formula, but also timing. The timing for the initiation of the mutation. So thinking about how Pluto is actually in 60, about to hit to 41. That Pluto is the one that when it goes through a gate, it turns something off and it turns something on. So the mutation, those children being born, even though it's before the 2027, there's still all of us as we get closer and closer being born, closer to that eventuality of a different shift, not only in background frequency, but also in the kinds of humans that are going to be born. Again, remember that humans are still going to be born after 2027. The 3 is what brings genetic material into the body as a mutation. So the 60 has to bow down to the 3 because the 3 is what gives the 60 life. It gives the responsive ability to mutate. So the language of the sacral center, this magic of our reproductivity, this is what gives our mutation life. And that one, all that one is getting from the, all that one is getting from the 60 is, one is getting the data, the pulsing acoustic frequency. And it's that third gate that concretizes that into fertility, into life, and it generates the mutation, as a fertile field. So when the 3 is open to the 60, it's open to the information of mutation, a transcendent capacity of the root center to be in contact with the form principle itself, where the information, the genetic material brought into the body as a mutation, here is where it's accessed. So that's what we're looking at, the reproductive system now here being altered. Remember, we're still reviewing stage 1 and stage 2. When we look at the defense circuit, remember this was the creative aspect of the defense circuit. Here's the other side, but this is the creative strength. So this channel 59.6 is the creative life force in the defense circuit. And the creativity of intimacy isn't always about children. Creative intimacies that lead to the nurturing of the baby idea and concept that grows up into a business or a fad or a thing, a dream, whatever it is that we make. We need to make this a thing. Well, what about this, building this business, this big business, because this is a big business strength. That's fertility, not just of more humans, but more human things that support more humans. So this channel of fertility and mating, it's the reproductive heart of a 9-centered reproductive system. That this reproductive system is altered completely and can never go back to what it was. To help us remember, also on the other side, this 2750, remember how in Dream Rave, if you studied it, this is not there. A lot of the gates shut down and go to sleep, you could say. On the other side, that's the reproductive capacity for mammals, the mammalian sex over on the other side. So just remembering that, the fertile cradle of life there. It's not immediate, according to Ra. After 1,300 years to the end of the round, what we will notice more than anything else is the diminished capacity to reproduce. And for a long time that won't be a problem, because in an age where the communal infrastructure will break down, fewer beings will manage to function much better than more. But it's doing more than that, he says. So it's going to change the way that the sexual desire operates. Something important to grasp about the impact that the relationship of the 36 and 6 have to each other. You know that they're oppositions in the wheel, especially if you know somebody in your life who has this. You recognize that. Eden's, confrontation, there's others. But it's going to change the way that our sexual desire operates, because this is part of the mutation. And over here with the 36, most likely, he says, we're dealing with an aspect that is going to be motorized. So some of this stuff, we're just going to have to see what happens and how it really shows up. What does it mean that part of the solar plexus is choked off from the emotional wave, where it's just flatline, and part of it is not? As far as our work as analysts, I'm thinking about, doing analysis readings for people in the future, let's say 20 years from now. And they have aspects that are still somewhat motorized and others that are not. So it's going to be a different way that we're going to have to contemplate these new people and really see from experience what is it really like for them, is my recommendation anyway. I don't like taking things for granted, especially when it's something new and we've not seen it before. So, but what Ra says about this is that the 6 takes away from the 55, the 49, the 37, and the 22. Not really the 55, because obviously that is the first compression that takes place. But what it does is it shifts the motor energy away. So 6 actually, he says, not really the 55, so that was a bit of a correction. But what we're looking at when we're looking at the 6 is that it is, remember, an opening or a closing to intimacy, right? The 6 is the source wave, the source of all the other waves, and so it will open or close to intimacy. And what it's doing, because it's part of the mutation, is it's shifting the motor energy away, that non-motorized potential here. It started with the 55. So, quote, it takes out of what is in essence the Rave part of the solar plexus, and it creates a kind of Berlin Wall isolating the Rave part with its non-motor potential, isolating it from the human experiential way. There's the Berlin Wall kind of thing to give us an idea of what he's talking about. So the motor frequency for humans is still going to be there. Remember, we'll have 2 kinds of beings being born, Raves and humans. So for humans, it's still going to be there. And most of that frequency, in essence, all of it, is going to be what the 30th gate manages to get from the 6. And it is the only gate, in essence, that still retains a deep motor relationship to the 6. The only aspect of the energy resource that the 6 has is that it can give over the emotional dynamic as we understand it. Give over to the emotional dynamic as we understand it, which is desire. So how I like to remember this is from personal experience. Because I'm a 4130, tons of 59.6s in my life. That strength, as well as this one up here, these channels actually feed into the 6 in a large group of people. So when you study Wa mechanics or OC16, the business side, you'll get a sense for how the sensing feeds into that 6. So we as people, I'm a great advisor for those 59.6s, the ones who recognize and invite me, right? So remember just kind of linking that, if you know that too, and now you know, linking that over to this, because this is desire, and then that means then the desire emotional wave frequency is going to be the dominant emotional theme. Emotion, energy in motion. What does it mean to have an emotion that's flat? I don't even know, just awareness probably. So we'll see. And the dominant theme, emotional theme, that has a flat approach to experience, because without a motor, will it leap at all? Or will, in fact, it be secure with the logical way? Well, there's a pattern over there. Let's stay with it. Maybe we'll eat our desires away. It's very interesting for us to observe as we move forward into this time frame to see what it's really going to be like as far as how this will impact the experiential process of humanity. I have a story there, but I don't want to go in there unless I have time, because I don't know how much time this is going to take me. So this is going to bring a lot of changes. The reproductive system being altered, according to Ra. A lot of changes. First, the way that we're going to be attracted to each other. It's going to change the conditions of our ability to be attracted to other people. It'll bring a change to the focus of our desire, in that it's going to take desire out of sexuality. So what he says that this means is that desire is going to be focused on the material, on the pleasure and pain, on the movement, but not focused on sexuality. Hard to imagine for someone like me, back in the day especially. The ability to conceive and produce children is also going to be reduced. So for most human beings, the way that it's going to appear, according to Ra, is that there's going to be a greater and greater difficulty of having children, or even being interested in it. And then also the way that the community is going to operate is going to be shifted because of this mutation. And he says that there are things that will change in the way that the community and civilization even are going to operate, but again, not just like overnight. It doesn't turn on a dime. It's going to emerge as the generations emerge that are born from 2027 onward. It's important to understand that. There was one of a student who wrote, was very irate and concerned about the industry not taking steps towards facing the 2020. We have 3 more years, 2027 being right around the corner, and just all this fear and angst about we've got to hurry up, and it's not going to happen like that. We do not want to subject anybody else, nor get caught up in the fear of the current background frequency. That person was a 1, so I can definitely see where she would get caught up in fear and fear-mongering, trying to bully her way to get something to change that she wanted. But that's not what works, especially when you're not manifested in nature. It's not about trying to get people to move out of fear. So all of these things that we're sharing, a lot of this can seem very challenging because it can seem scary depending on your values. If you don't really care about children, no problem. You might have an inkling of, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to humans. But coming from a place of recognizing that this is going to take some time, so that you're not the person out there yelling doomsday with your sign, it's the end of the world, and then everything's fine the next day or the next year in 2027. We don't know what's going to happen. Of course, lots of changes, but it doesn't have to be so dramatic as to try to control people out of fear. That's a seven-centered construct or habit, hangover, you could say. Okay, now we're going into Stage 3, I forgot. We have new material. Okay, the family, gate of friendship, 37. It's a gate of affection, as you might recall. And the gate of the kiss, you might remember. So one of the things that he finds interesting, that in practice, the Raves will find the most disturbing, potentially hugging too, because we know that this is about hugging, but kissing. It will make them very uncomfortable, something practically impossible for them to read. There's the kiss. Okay, so the shift that takes place when you take the motor element away from the 37, you take away the kiss, according to Ra. And when you take away the kiss, you take away the emotional reason for the bargain in the first place. Bargains are either direct sexual bargains or indirect sexual bargains. The 37th gate, without the emotional element, without that wave, what will it do? What does it do? So we look on the other side and we see deliverance, the gate of aloneness. We will still have that channel, but it will lose its drive. We will lose that stream. I'll say mutation. Sounds less doom and gloom. Deliverance, the gate of denial. If you think about the nature of work, this is the love of work. So we have the potential to love our work, working for the community, for our family, building an infrastructure, building our society, the police, the people who are here to serve us and clean and feed, and this organized process that we've gotten to. That is all breaking down because of the background frequency shifting. So we see the design of a part seeking a whole, that channel of community. This is the world that we live in still. The bargains where the tribe is the one that makes and enforce the laws. You know, you get kicked out if you're not obeying our laws. Sorry, but that's the rules. And these basic bargains, if you do this, then you get that. That's the deal. If you maintain your integrity agreement, you get a listing on IHDS. If you don't, you get removed. So this is the legality of the world that we live in. The rules designed to protect the community, where the laws protect the community. And because they are enforced, all of us are more likely to be able to live together in somewhat relative harmony. So we see the temple, gate 40, aloneness, and the way, gate 37, friendship. As far as the heart and soul of the global cycle that we've been living in since the beginning of the 17th century. And by 2027, it will be over 400 years that we've lived under the influence of this way of being. It is what created our large institutions and our educational system. So he says, if you think about the last 400 years, most of what we base our concepts and our civilizations on, the way that the understanding of the world is in our lives, is a byproduct of this communal structure and bonding, that influence of this channel of community, the part seeking a whole. And then we saw in the Ides of February, it shifts over to the cross of the sleeping phoenix, where we have no background frequency elements. And he says, you can see that it's not in any way a cosmic accident that the turning of the wheel leaves the 3740 and the era of community. We have this transformation in the emotional system that is deeply connected to community. And historically, without the knowledge of human design, it would have taken a couple of hundred years for somebody to look back and actually notice the change, that things have to break down, that the support has to disappear, and that what the 6 is doing to that 37, we've already seen the distribution of the change of energy where the 6 pulls the motor energy away from the 3740. It's like sucking it back in, if you could put it that way. He says it takes the motor energy out of it, and that's its whole purpose as far as the mutation, the compression of the wave until there is no wave. And then what happens is that this becomes something very different than what we know it to be. It changes the way we love because the emotional bond is gone. Remember, deliverance, the gate of aloneness, is a gate of loving the other, earning love through being able to deliver on promises, the tribal bond. So the emotional bond being gone, it can no longer be a spiritual bridge anymore because it will no longer have the same energy to work. And in many ways, it will have a much more vulnerable digestive system. In another place, he says it's going to go flat where there's going to be no wave, there's no crank. Remember, this is about getting cranked up and cranked up and cranked up like jacking up a car. So can you imagine trying to drive the willpower that is ready to deny when there's no crank to push it and there's no kiss to reward it? And he says, work for you? Really? He was a 40. So his stance on work was, it was just his life. This is what I do. It wasn't work, it was what he be, his work with human design. And so I have a couple of slides at the end to give you as a contemplation for this week, because what I recognize is that this is a good place to have a little bit of homework or conversation in the forum about what your sense of things, your recognition so far, because next week we're going to go into the Autive or the Raves design. So here, if we think about the tension between the emotional system and the ego, this acceptance and appreciation and affection, and the other side, denial. The 40th gate brings the willpower to fulfill this stream of need, this sensitivity that we have here. Without willpower, there's no way that needs can truly be fulfilled. So somebody with a 1949-37 who doesn't have a 40 is going to have trouble fulfilling their needs because it's the willpower that drives that, right? We don't have the willpower to fulfill the needs if we don't have the defined 40, if that person has those activations. So if we think about this, there's the mouth, 37, and on the other side, there's the stomach, the 40. So if we think about the community and the need to fulfill its needs, one of the priorities in the community is food. We see that allusion to the mouth and stomach in terms of ego and emotion at 37 and at 40, in opposition in the wheel, as well as in harmonic traits, gates in a channel. He says it's something to understand that unless there is the willpower to provide for more than oneself, then the community isn't going to have enough to eat. So we come to the end of the completion of the process of stage 3. And now we're going to segue into stage 4, where you can see the influence of the 6th line in all of this. Because it's interesting, at a biological level, one of the gate, the 6th gate. I was thinking of the transition into the new era where the 6th line. Let me go back and explain what my mind was doing. Here, the community not having enough to eat. I wonder if you guys have noticed in either children or just society in general, not being perhaps willing or able to work as hard to provide for self. More apathy, less just the younger generation. I hear it from my husband, I see it in my daughter, but just not that same kind of drive that we were raised with. And I don't know what it's like for those of you who are older, but I just don't see it in the same way. So when he said that the community isn't going to have enough to eat, there's going to be a slide where you see Katja has thinned out that channel. And I also think about, what's going to happen to these people that expect the, I can hear Ross saying, the trains to run on time, the garbage man to come, the food trucks to be delivered, that kind of thing. And if they're apathetic and they're incapable because they don't know how, even if they are, hungry, will lead you to learn. But what if they don't know how to go and feed themselves? Particularly with a weak stomach, that means that you're going to have a lot more food sensitivities. So that's why the 6th line crept in there. But let's talk about the 6 as a gate, as part of the mutation. So he says it's interesting because at a biological level, one of the associations for the 6 is that it's the pH of the body. And what he says about pH is about whether something is going to be, as an example, highly porous or not. So the 6 is so much about creating boundaries and barriers, whether they're going to be there or not. Number 6 is the one that controls intimacy, the opening or closing to intimacy, like a door, that swings open or shut. The 6 is the one that does that. So it's not only the source of the wave, it's been supporting the motor function of all these various gates that we see here. And what happens, we're going to have this point where it simply takes back the support of the motor function, and it keeps all of that motor function housed within this. And here we have the 37 with the flat line, the 49, and the 55. 55 already has that flat line with occasional spikes. Now notice how the 22 still has some spikes there. So pulling back of the motor function means then that the 6 is going to have more energy available, according to Ra. And again, much more energy to be able to support the mutation. And at the same time, an energy drain on the fertility of humans, because not a lot of energy, in essence, is going to be going towards humans. So it's important to keep in mind the importance of the 6th gate in all of this, and recognize that the transformation of the solar plexus system, regardless of the triggers and mutative forces, that all of this is orchestrated through that 6th gate. He says, the expression when something is just flat, when you talk about intensity, or you talk about somebody who shows a lot of intensity, or there's a lot of intensity on their face, and then with somebody else, just flat expression. There's a flatness that's going to be brought to these gates at having their motor pulled back. So planing is another word that comes to mind besides just flat, just nothing. So basically what this compression is doing, in essence, it's closing down the capacity of any given channel that it's affecting. So in the case of the 1949, what we have is a complete closing off of the channel, like that. So in terms of the human being, humans will experience the 19 and they will experience the 49, but they will not, and now I'm talking about the ones born after 2027, they will not experience the channel of synthesis. So to understand what that's going to mean for a human being to incarnate as a human being, not a rave, that's next week, we'll talk about that. After the mutation takes place, is to understand that the 19th gate as a need, it's going to be housed here. It's not going to be driving principles, fear of nature, divorce, or this is the stream of love, honor, and obey. So also you've seen marriage, success, or rates on the decline as well. No drive for that, no need for that. meaning no need for community, no need to control animals because they're probably not going to be driven towards eating animals, and no need for the marriage bond. It's not going to drive any of that because there won't be a connection there between the two gates. And then we have these communal gates too of the emotional system, everything going through a deep transformation, so no longer having the adrenalized drive to live in community. There's no need for it, no will for it. Well, just a little, but not like before, because the motor up here will still be a motor. It's reduced. So think about this image. When he says no will, he really means reduced. Okay, a reduced will. Because we don't have also the drive from the adrenaline system to be able to complete a full stream in humans after 2027 that are born. So I keep saying that because it's confusing. To be very clear, if you are somebody born before 2027, you will still have a channel down there. And let's say I don't have anything as far as planetary life aspects there in 1949, I will still be conditioned by somebody who has that as a channel that was born before 2027. That's how it will work. But then in 100 so years, people die off, that will be completely gone from our world. Okay? So that means reduced will and no need for community to control animals, for the marriage bond. Born before 2027, we have this as a body graph. Born after 2027, we're going to have to change our software so that it shows look like this. And so for those who are going to be correct, he says that correctness for them, born after 2027, and correctness for us and what we live with and what we carry with us, we have a quantum of this channel, and we will do so for as long as we live, to the end of our days. I will still have a channel, you will still have a channel, and thank you. You will still have the ability to be conditioned or affected by others with those activations. And humans will be conditioned by those channels, by those of us who are alive until we all die out. But those who are born after, by the time we enter into the era of 2027, by then we will have this break, and the reality of the transformation of what it would be to be human will be very obvious in 2127. So 2027, that century between 2027 and 2127, we will see the effects of this in full. Because the infrastructure, according to Ra, in 100 years from then, will show all signs of complete collapse. And the dependency of human beings on being their own authority is something that's going to be a growing essential awareness. So in other places, he says it's those people who are back to the land, back to homesteading and being able to sustain your own solar, water, food, that kind of thing, are the ones who kind of are going to be able to sustain themselves. Cities, you already see it. I don't know if you've ever heard, I just hear it third party, my husband tells me, and different, sometimes social media pops up, but inner cities are really looking scary because he told me this story and I couldn't even imagine it. In certain places, because grocery stores might be really far for people, if they don't have a car and they're not able to get to a grocery store, they might just eat off of, convenience stores where it's all packaged foods, and I can't even imagine that. But that kind of thing is just going to get worse and worse as far as everything breaking down of the ability to sustain community living in the same way that we've become accustomed to. So that's why, being your own authority. Revolution, the gate of principles, that's our 49th gate, and it brings the revolution of a Rave being coming into the world, which brings the beginning of the end for humanity. So this 49th gate, principles, that wavers in the wave, he says, that in the not self can mean anything. One of the things that he would say is about it's the last dying gasp of fundamentalism. We have socialism and communism as a stream over here as far as politically speaking. So you see a lot of extremists, you know, human beings are very good killer monkeys, you know, he would say. And this is one of those killer gates as far as, you know, love, honor, and obey, or off with your head. Remember way back in the day when kings would be able to kill their wives for being infidel? What is it? For infidelity? Okay. So it's very violent, this area of the body graph. So this is it. After 2027, no longer that jacking up and then, you know, release of the pressure. No longer wavering. He wants us to think about that and what that might mean. A very different 49th gate, as we will see next week with the Octave circuit, where their keynote is about melding, because that Rave being is more about being receptive. And it's the receptive environment of the Rave, truly, what the energy is going towards in the evolution of us as a species. But for humans, it will be flat. This is one of the ways we're going to have to look very deeply at in order to understand the future of analysis. And for me, I don't like predicting. I would rather see, okay, what does it actually show up like, and then move from there. We'll see.